And so this unit of measure is a really important part when we start talking between each other. And so I want to highlight that as you join us in this Trees Around the Globe student research campaign right now, and hopefully give us a little bit of a focus here for the next 4 weeks, you will help us to understand how deep the snow is in places, whether places are covered in snow, and I'll highlight that that gives us some indications about what we might experience in 90 days and in 180 days. And this leads into those summer conditions that so many people who are joining us really like to go out and experience those trees, right? You don't have the snow, you don't have the cold. But just recognize that what you're experiencing today is an indication and gives you a forecast for the future. So, Brian, let's dive into how people can join us and actually take part in our Trees Around the Globe student research campaign. Because, this is a really great moment of time when people do tend to be inside because it might be cold or, it's not as much fun to go out and make measurements. And so I think that there's some opportunities here to focus in on data in a way that maybe you don't want to do any other time of the year. So Brian, thanks for having us today and take us away into our 2026 campaign.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And yep, thank you for all the discussion in the beginning. And thank you, everyone, for putting your information in the chat. And let me go ahead and share my screen right now. Here we go. Entire screen here. All right. Does that look good from your end?
Yep, it's good.
All right. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the latest Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign webinar. This is the State of Trees, January 2026. And today, in addition to, beginning the year off, even though this isn't the beginning of the year 8 of the campaign, we are beginning the calendar year off this January 2026 with the discussion a lot today and how you can participate in the campaign as we go forward. Specifically today, we're going to be, have a lot of focus on the Virtual Science Symposium, or the VSS for GLOBE, VSS 2026, looking at your ground-based and space-based tree height and land cover observations. So today we're going to do some focusing on how you can look at that tree height and land cover observations with a couple caveats in here about, looking at the data and making sure your observations and data are where they're supposed to be. And that's something that we've talked about often. I'll touch on that a little bit, and I know Peter will touch on that, a bunch more. And then Peter Falcon will talk some more about some real-world applications of looking at land cover and seeing change and things like that. So what we have here in this shareable here is, we have a lot going on here, but you can see we have that logo for the Virtual Science Symposium for 2026. And as you know, we have an abbreviated timeline this year because, as you know, things in GLOBE are changing, and I don't have, before anyone asks, I don't have all the answers to that because, none of us here with the campaign are part of GIO and that team. So we're just here for the Trees Around the Globe student research campaign. But what you see around that logo is you can see these badges that you can earn, that the students can earn for their Virtual Science Symposia research projects that are submitted. But with that said, I'm going to, since we're talking about the VSS, Virtual Science Symposium, we always talk about collaboration. We do this every year. We talk about the importance of collaboration, the importance of the science collaboration when we're doing the research projects. And I found some really nice quotes here that bring us into this. And the first one is from Dr. John Bardeen. He was an American physicist and the only person to be awarded the Nobel Prize in physics twice. Science is a collaborative effort. The combined results of several people working together is often much more effective than could be that of an individual scientist working alone. Pretty much common sense, right? Okay. Don't feel like you need a quote for that, but he said it. He said it a long time ago, but it makes a lot of sense, right? And the second one is from Amit Ray, and he is an Indian author and spiritual master known for teachings on meditation, yoga, peace, and compassion. I really like this one. Collaboration is the essence of life. The wind, bees, and flowers work together to spread the pollen. So all about collaboration. So that's one thing. We have students from all over the globe community, 127 countries. When the whether it be students working together, as students in a classroom, or students together in a school, or students in different countries working together, looking at the same data but across maybe the same latitudes or even different latitudes, looking at the same data to see how they compare, see how they contrast, see how the same type of tree species grow in different environments, in different biomes. Okay. That's collaboration. And that's one of the things that we really focus on with the Virtual Science Symposium. We want to see how your local environment is observed and how it can be compared with local environments all around the planet so we can understand our global environment just a little bit better. So today we're going to I'm going to go over right now we're doing the introduction, agenda, housekeeping, metrics, all that stuff. Then I'm going to go over the final results, if you remember, of the 2025 1-month tree height and land cover intensive observation period that started on the 21st of November and went to the 21st of December 2025. And then I'm going to go over looking at tree height observation examples, talk a little bit about geolocation, open altimetry, and geolocation meaning, like I mentioned earlier, is your tree where you think it is? Okay. And I know that's a big thing with Peter. And I know, as I mentioned, Peter will go into that a little bit more when he talks about some of the land cover things he's going to talk about and some of the data. And I'll talk a little bit about the open altimetry and ISAT2, and I'll give a couple examples. And then I will pass it over to Peter Nelson to looking at land cover observation examples, geolocation online tools, and looking at change over time. And then after that, you will have some Q&A, all throughout, question and answer sessions. And then after that, we'll have a discussion about observations in the real world with Peter Falcon. And then we can have any questions and discussion about VSS from participants, and we can, answer anything we can. But there is, as you know, a website for this. I'm going to go over a couple metrics here. Here's where we have the active countries for the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign right now. Here is our campaign metrics, and I draw your attention to year 8, where we are right now. We have lots of numbers coming in. We're over 12,700 measurements from over 3,400 global sites. We're excited to see that. And if you go all the way to the bottom here, since the beginning of the campaign on the 15th of September 2018, and as you remember, that's when the Ice Cloud and Land Elevation Satellite 2, or ISAT-2 satellite, launched into space, which has a huge tie-in with the campaign because that satellite uses a laser altimeter in space, but it also measures tree height. It focuses on the polar regions and sea ice and ice sheets and the melting of those areas, measuring the height of sea ice and ice sheets, the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica primarily. But because it has an altimeter in space, we're able to measure the height of objects on Earth, especially trees. We've measured several 100 billion trees with ISAT-2 so far, with about 3.03 trillion trees on the planet right now. This is why your observations through GLOBE and GLOBE Observer are extremely important. But with that said, for the life of the campaign so far, we are over 261,000 observations of tree height, land cover, and greenings from almost 79,500 global sites. And that is as of just this morning, the 13th of January, 2026. All right. So the IOP, that was a 1-month IOP for tree height and land cover. We were looking for, primarily seeing these leaves changing, this, basically this green down in the Northern Hemisphere. And then we have this, these greenings in the Southern Hemisphere. And the final numbers came in. This was for the 1-month period. And on the left side, we have tree height. We had 1,989 tree height observations from 683 global locations. And you can see the map right there where they came from. And in land cover, we had 637 observations from 346 global locations. So thank you all for that. And Here is the map of them together. This is pretty good. You can see we have a really good representation here across the globe. There's some spots here we like to see more, of course, but this is in that 1 month period that we are, super happy to have that amount of observations for tree height and land cover. And if you go to, I should say, if you go to this link that says more about the IOP at the bottom, and I'll put that in the chat in a little later on after I stop sharing my screen. But you can always go to our campaign webpage, and on the left-hand side in that navigation menu, you'll see campaign IOPs. You can click on that, and what you'll find is this here, and it's a digital badge. You can just grab from it, and feel free to just take it and put it where you like. And I know that they're no longer the personal pages on the Globe website, where a lot of folks like to put their digital badges. And sorry that you can't add it to that anymore. That was one thing that the Globe program was, discontinuing those personal specific pages, and that is out of our control. That is, not our decision. So, but we wanted you to have this, this personal. If you took the tree height or land cover observations during this time, feel free to grab this badge and, just, keep it in your file somewhere. And I wanted to let you know that this is a picture. The background picture is one that I took. This was in Wicomico County, Maryland. It's Wicomicoy, Comico County, Maryland, the county that I live in Maryland, in the United States. It's named after a Native American tribe, but it's I thought it was a great fall picture. I took this about 6 or 7 years ago, about 10 minutes from our house. I just thought it was great. It's hard to see on the bottom, but it was a house that was abandoned, and it's just the tree colors in the fall were just amazing. It's basically every color you can see in the fall was in this area. So it's just an amazing fall tree color. But I wanted to create this because since it's what we were focusing on, it was basically in the fall where we had this IOP. So I just wanted to let you know that these were the final numbers, and you can also see all this information, these final numbers. You can see this graphic right here on the website, on the IOP site that you see here at the bottom at this link. So, and then there's going to probably be a social media post about this in the near future. So, but check this out, and thank you to everyone who's on this webinar who participated in this as well.
Hey, Brian, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
Since we're talking science research questions,
Yes.
what was the minimum tree height that came in, or what was the maximum tree height that we recorded? Is that something that you did a little analysis on, or is that something we can actually maybe put out to the community here?
We could put
Um,
that out to the community for sure. Yep. We haven't done
Good.
that yet, but yeah, it's something we could put out to the community.
Yeah, I think that to me is a really interesting question that when I see this presentation that you just gave us of the data set that came in, I like the maps, I'm a map person, but that sort of, that next metric I think is really interesting for the tree height. Question in particular. And so I want to invite, anybody who's on our call here to take that on as a research question. From all of these 683 locations, what was the height that came in? How many of them had leaves on their trees versus didn't? I think this is a nice data set that has nobody's looked at it, right, Brian? And I think you just
Yeah.
said that.
Yeah. And you can easily just go to just the ADAT in Globe and just grab the CSV file. And then there's a
Good.
column there that gives you all that tree height, and you can organize that from tallest to shortest or shortest to tallest, and grab it there. And you can just do a quick graph there, and it, won't take you much time. And it's, it's super easy to do, and it's fun to do.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Brian, for letting me chime in on that little piece right there of what, brand new data. People can do new science. They
Yeah.
don't have to research. They can actually do that
Yeah.
initial searching, right?
And I have a little question for you, Peter. Just by looking at this as a quick glance, what is your quick take
Yeah.
without knowing anything else? By if you look dead center at those those
Yep.
5 or 6 points of land cover that you see in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, yeah, Brian. Thanks for highlighting that because since you put a map or th this nice satellite imagery as reference, I can use that to identify questionable things that I want to investigate first, or clumps of data where I see both land cover and tree height, right? Like that might be a place that I want to investigate and see how they go together. But when I see just like that, those ones in the blue, you're right. It does
Yeah,
kind of bring a question of what's there. So I want to go look at the photos that were submitted with this to see, are they supposed to be out in water like that, or if I zoom in, Brian, maybe there's actually islands there that
yeah,
at this level I can't see. Right. So one of the things that I really appreciate about this is, for me, I can start honing my question a little bit more from this reference of a map, and I can take this whole global pool of data and try to work with it. Or, I think it could be really interesting to zoom into one of the globe country or regions and do a larger analysis. One of the things that I am really happy to see here is that, yes, we seem to have a lot more contributions from the Northern Hemisphere. We can see Europe and then the United States in particular. But I'm really happy to see that we do have some representation of the southern part of the hemisphere, right? And I'll just say I know that because I've looked at a lot of maps, but Brian hasn't given us a reference of north, south, or anything like that, right? So I'm bringing quite a bit of knowledge
yeah,
to what we're looking at right here. And I think that's an important part of how reference images or reference data like this can help us to quickly get a sense for, are these places in the right place? Like Anna highlighted right there, latitude longitude error on the phones is one of the first things that you want to look at and make sure that your data is in the right place so that when we go into some of these later details and start combining it together with NASA satellite data, you're looking at the same places. And that is, as Brian was highlighting, just so crucial to our understanding. I think, and that's what we really kind of want to focus on today is that geolocation, and how do we know that we're actually in the same location as this other information, this other data. And it could be even be globe data. So Anna, I really appreciate you highlighting, this latitude longitude error from a phone because Globe does have a whole protocol of evaluating how we locate ourselves. And I want to encourage everybody to go back to that GPS protocol because that's really a foundational piece of what we're doing right here. And so, luckily, this is what we do. In our science here in the Globe program and with NASA science in particular. And so, I agree with Brian. Like, it's really exciting to see the way that this pattern has evolved over the last 8 years of our campaign. And so right there, I just kind of want to all end with saying brand new science that nobody has really dove into or really characterized yet. So I'm always one to look at things in that nobody else has. So come
yeah.
join us in this as we go through some methods, right, Brian? That's kind of our
Right.
goal for today.
Yep. Yep. And that's great because you just mentioned the geolocation and making sure you know where it is. And that's what I'm going to touch a little bit upon. I know you will too, Peter. So let's jump ahead. Oh, I want to also do this before I jump into that. Since we're talking VSS, I want to remind everyone about the important dates and timeline. This is directly from the website. Right now, I highlighted the two in green, the kind of phase we're in right now. We are in the period for submitting VSS projects, and the 30th of January is the final day for submitting the projects. So you can see that. And I have in the yellow, those are the things that are coming up. I know they're a little different. If you happen, I know some people on here may be reviewers. And then we have a review period. And then the 4th of March, we have a feedback to participants and celebration of research. And then we have a link here at the bottom, which I'll also include in the chat a little later on. But I wanted to, and these are all on that website, on that link at the bottom as well. But I just wanted to remind people of that because this is important because of the abbreviated timeline. Is usually run March is usually that deadline, but since the opening for the period for submitting the VSS projects was earlier this year, and it of course closes earlier this year. So keep that in mind, everyone. And I know I've gotten some emails from some folks in some of the different countries where they have already submitted their IVS. I apologize if I say IVSS. It's through habit VSS projects. So, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about looking at tree height observation with some examples. Okay, I don't have a long presentation because of timing, because we have a bunch of, I have some discussion, and then Peter as well, and then Peter Falcon at the end. But looking at this, I put these up here, these different pictures, because they're from different time periods, but one of them is AI. Hopefully you can tell which one is AI. It's just one that I just thought was cool, so I threw it on there. The one with the satellites, of course, is AI because none of those satellites are actually real satellites. They're just computer-generated satellites. I just thought that was a cool picture. And part of the NASA meatball logo is cut off because it is completely wrong. I'm not sure what AI is thinking. That is the NASA logo, so that's why I cut it off on there. But yeah, so but a lot of these have to do with trees. But okay, here we go. All right, so with that said, I'm going to show you just an example first of one that I've done. And I'm showing you this because this is something that students and educators helping them have done over, the last, I'm not going to say 8 years, but I'm going to say at least the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years, when they're doing some comparisons between like open altimetry and, looking for the tree height data from ICET2 and comparing them to their data. So this is one that I like to show because, it was pretty good because the location was good. I'm going to start off with one where the location was good. Then I made sure I checked all the boxes, crossed my T's, dotted my I's, and make sure like the location accuracy was good. So this was actually on, if you look in the middle, what you're seeing here in this image here, this is from Open Altimetry. This is where we can get the ICET2 data, okay? And on the bottom, what you see there, that's the URL to the Open Altimetry website. And just so as a reminder, this website was created by the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. And basically, it's where the ICET2 data is housed. And this is a website created for scientists so they can look at the different types of ICET2 data, whether they're looking for the elevation of the height of the trees or the ice or of buildings or of the oceans or any types of bodies of water. They can find that data by looking at the height of these, basically looking at these photons. And that's what you're seeing here. Since ICET2, when it fires off these 6 tracks of laser beams. And that's what you see here. These are 6 laser beam tracks. They're in pairs. So the one we're focusing on here is the green, and it looks kind of like an orangish, the green and orange, okay? And that you'll see is running through an area where it looks like there's lines. Those are runways for the airstrip here at the NASA Wallops Flight Facility. So that's where I am sitting right now. I'm sitting on that base right now in Wallops Island, Virginia. So, and what you see to the east of us, you see lots of marsh and water. And, just to the right of the photons that are green and yellow, you'll see a populated area. That's an island called Chincoteague Island. That's another Native American term. That's Chincoteague Island. That's a, very historic, I think goes back into the 1600s. It's very historic. And I know there's some folks from a lot of folks from Europe there. 1600 is relatively new for you there, but for the United States, 1600s is very old, but yeah, that's a relatively old spot for us. But that's an island where it's a big area of fishing, and fishing is one of the main areas. Fishing and crabbing and oysters and everything. It's a big area there. So I digressed a bit there. Well, what we're looking at there is what we're looking at is where that ISAT 2 crossed over the Wallops Flight Facility, where you see the runways there. And I gave you the latitude and longitude. So then one of those photons that you see in here, and it's going to be, right towards the center here. And one of those photons dropped right here in these trees. Okay. So I figured out where it mentioned where it dropped in these trees. So I went out and took observations. So I went and took observations. Um, First, I should say, first I went to Open Altimetry and I grabbed, what ISAT 2 found this tree canopy height as. Okay. And when I say this, when I say what it found the tree canopy height as, when ISAT 2 drops a photon, okay, the photon is basically like a big laser pointer when it leaves the satellite. But as it travels about 300 miles from the satellite down to the planet, that photon, the photon footprint gets bigger and bigger and bigger. By the time it hits the trees or the ground, it's about 13 meters in diameter. So anything that photon hits, okay, basically what happens is the photon leaves the satellite, hits an object on Earth, bounces off it, and then returns back to the satellite, okay, at the speed of light. So it's super fast, right? So what's going to happen is that anything that has height or elevation within that photon footprint, okay, that gets averaged into that height measurement for ISAT 2. So that average height of those trees, and I went over to that location and I studied it, pretty drastically, and I found out there were approximately 5 trees that fell within that 13-meter diameter footprint, because where it hit, it looks like in this picture, because just by looking at this picture, it looks like a really densely packed forest, doesn't it? But it's actually not, because when I went over there, there is actually a pretty open space right around where this photon hit. So this photon hit the edge of this open space, and then about 5 trees that are right on the edge of this photon footprint. So ISAT 2 was able to measure basically these 5 trees with an average of 22.08 meters. So I went out, and you can see there's a lot of open space here. You can see, especially in this fifth image here from the Globe Observer. So I went out and took these 5 tree height observations. And, in order to get these perfect, you can do these multiple times, okay? As perfect as you can get. But I took these measurements and I got 22.84 meters for one tree, 20.7 meters, 23.96 meters, 23.03 meters, and 28.97 meters. So I took these 5 and I averaged them together, and I got 23.90 meters for these 3. And I did a comparison between what I thought I got, from the Globe Observer of 23.90 meters, and I compared that with 22.08 meters from ISAT 2. And I didn't get that bad of a difference, 1.82 meters. Now, what did this entail? It didn't entail with me just going over there and measuring every tree in that area. I really had to go there and I had to figure out exactly where this photon hit, because you can see here on the ISAT 2 measurement, it gives a very, very specific, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 14 decimal points is the latitude. So that is very, very specific. Longitude as well. Okay. So that's a very specific. So I had to go over and figure out exactly where that location was. Now I didn't get all the way down to 14 decimal points. That's very specific. Okay. But I got to where that location was on center here on the NASA Wallace Flight Facility, and I found those trees that were right at that location. Okay. You can't tell by just looking here, right? You can't just, you see where the photon hits, but you can't see what trees are exactly in that spot. Okay. It's impossible to tell. And like when you look here, even harder, and here, impossible, right? So impossible, basically impossible, impossible, until you actually go out into the field and look at it directly and do some other observation. That's a research project, right? That you're really focusing on that. So I went out and took examples. So this is an example of doing that research and, getting out there and really, really making sure that the location is accurate, to the best you can get it. Okay. And then we come to when you take an observation and you just rely on your thinking the location is going to be where your phone thinks it is, okay? And I'm just going to show you this right here. There's a couple examples here I want to show you. Now, here we have a location. Okay, this happens to be in Brazil, all right? What's interesting about this is on the left side is Open Altimetry. This is ISAT2 again. And on the right side is a globe visualization tool. And one thing you'll notice here is that they're using the same background. They're using that same land cover layer, right? You see that cloud that's in the middle on the left one? That's the same cloud that you see on the bottom, on the bottom right with the globe visualization system. Okay, great. Okay, so we know we have a location. Now, the reason why I chose Brazil is because Brazil has, there's been a really amazing Latin American Caribbean region, a lot of push for lots of observations, with their campaign. And I was looking over the last even year and just even the last month or two, the amazing amount of tree height observations that are coming from Brazil. And I was looking at the globe visualization system, and it's just amazing the amount of observations coming from Brazil. And you can just see just in this little photo here of all the ones that you can see just in this little shot, this screenshot on the globe visualization system of all these observations. Now, I want to pick out one, and then I'm going to go into the globe visualization system and zoom in for a second live after I get out of this, just to show you something here in a second. But if you're looking here, this looks pretty standard, okay? We have ISAT2 on the left side. We have the globe visualization on the right side. But then when I zoom in to a couple of these trees, what do you see? Okay, you see 3 of these tree height observations, but do you see them anywhere near a tree? They are not, okay? They are on top of a building, okay? From here, you can't tell that if they're on a tree or not. It looks like there's green and stuff around it, right? But when you zoom in further and further and further, or I should say closer and closer and closer, okay? Now, a lot of these that I zoomed into, they look like they're on trees, okay? They look great, okay? Not all of them, but this one stood out, okay? These 3 really stood out, and they were on top of a building, okay? And by looking at this, I'm not sure where these trees are, where these trees are. I don't know if these are the trees to the northwest up here. I don't know if they're the ones supposed to be to the south. Are they the ones that are in that little courtyard just to the east? Are they ones that are near that parking area to the east northeast? I'm not sure. So this is where it's important, like as Peter was mentioning earlier, geolocation is so important. Use that GPS protocol. Also, I have in here, I'm going to zip to this real fast. Another thing that is important that potentially use is this as well. I know your phone isn't always 100% accurate, but this is another thing that you can use to actually try to get a little closer. It's to use this location, to use this set position where you can drop this arrow at exactly where that tree location is. And one of the reasons why I have this video here is that I went and I did some observations just outside of our Wallops Gate, okay? And it's a tree that is behind what is called the Chincoteague Bay Field Station. It used to be called the Marine Science Consortium. But there's a tree that stands alone in the field, okay? And I've taken multiple observations of this tree. But I took some, these are the ones over the last 5 years that I took, okay? I think there's 3 of observations. And I did it by just, using the phone, and that I just used the phone. I didn't use the map, and you'll see what the result was. And here we're back on the base. You see on the left side, we're back here on the base here. And then on the middle here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this next slide. And as you can see here, the tree that I'm looking for is this one almost, you'll see the 2 images of the trees in the middle. If you go just up and to the left a little bit, that's the top of the tree. That's the canopy of the tree, the one that I measured, okay? But you can see the two tree pictures that I have here, okay, are pretty close, but they're not on top of the tree. And the other one, for some reason, is on the building, and that's actually on where there is a lecture hall where that building is as well. So that's why I have this here. One, as Peter mentioned, the GPS protocol is a really, really good thing to use, as well as this here, this setting your position, because the phone will give you what it thinks the latitude and longitude is, but then you can also be a little more precise and then drop that red arrow where you think that tree, where, or I should say, where that tree location is. You can drop it right at that spot. Peter, do you have anything to add to this?
Oh, this is a fun topic, Brian.
Yes.
And yes, I think, I really appreciate what you're highlighting right here because one of the things that we're doing, as I mentioned earlier, is we are looking at these photos and these locations in relation to this base map. And that's where we can get led astray sometimes because that's not always up to date. It doesn't have the buildings in there, or maybe the tree even. The tree might not be there, or it might have been planted, as so many of our people are doing. So that's one thing to just recognize is this reference layer underneath this satellite view that you're showing right here. It has a moment in time that was captured.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's visible to us, sometimes it's not. And so it's really that you can use that. However, I also want to point out that you're not making a measurement when you use the map to get your coordinates from. You are now using map coordinates. And that is digital data that can, not be in exactly the right place when you go back to that tree. There's a difference between the digital twin of what you see online on a map and the actual location on Earth, the actual coordinates. And
Yep.
so this is an ongoing challenge that is the reason why we have geography as a science, because it's all about really trying to describe one thing in relation to another using these coordinates, using math as one of the ways that we do that. And so just recognize too that one of the reasons for the GPS protocol and one of the things it recommends there is you should be standing there for 5 minutes when you do this. It
Mhm.
is not a very quick thing that you go through, which a lot of us like to do. But I really want to stress that if you go back to the importance of locating yourself using a measurement device, the GPS or your phone, which is the measurement of this. Um, that you should be spending 5 minutes just making sure that you are getting that correct. Okay. And then do some of these exact things that Brian you highlighted right there. And I want to, move into exactly what you're talking about here, Brian, is geolocation is so crucial because we're referencing ourselves to another thing. And if we're going to claim that we're actually measuring the same things, we need to go through and prove to the other people who are making ISAT2 measurements or doing the other side of things that we're referencing ourselves to, that we're paying attention to what they're doing. And so, even though we talk a lot about being at this coordinate, like you showed on when we make that measurement, just remember that that accuracy provides a buffer around that and a
Mhm.
level of uncertainty of our location. And so, that is a really important thing as we start moving into digital space and start thinking about the modeling or what we're doing next with those locations and coordinates. So just recognize that that statistics can be your friend here in this place, and all of it is building confidence in what you're presenting to other people. And that's really the name of the science game here that we want to talk about. So Brian, I really love this because you presented a really discrete research problem and method here that anybody can do. And so it doesn't take long to participate in our campaign here. And really, recognizing what we need, what how you can use these base maps in relation to what you're collecting is what we want to build off of. And I love this because a single tree is our starting point. And from a single tree or an individual, with you have to have more to come up with a forest, right? And so back to what you were saying, Brian, a forest doesn't exist with one tree. And just like good science, being around other individuals or making multiple measurements allows us to use the power of statistics and the power of multiple measurements and remeasurement to gain confidence in what we are measuring. So I just want to really highlight that making multiple measurements of the same tree is a good thing. And that can be done within an hour. And then some of the analysis that Brian showed could be done also within about an hour time period. So if you need to just focus quickly and go through the science process, just remember that that tree has grown since ISAT-2 flew over and made those measurements. So that could be a reason why there's a difference right there. So, explore that, dive into that. Because when we start thinking about or zooming out to what we can measure from space, again, we're rarely talking about an individual. We're usually talking about a community. And that's what land cover really is. When we look at it, it's a community of individuals and how they interact with sunlight. Okay, so Brian did a really good job of giving us something really quick to go through, and I want to pick up on that. And one of the things that I'd like to start off with is exactly where Brian had us going, and that is the globe visualization system, because this is part of what we're doing together, right? Is we're sharing our data and allowing other people to explore it. So this could be the other thing. If you don't have time or the ability to go out and make your own primary measurements, well, that's okay. This is the digital science that is just as valuable. Um, and so many of us hopefully have seen this and used this. And I want to, stress that this thematic map that we're looking at, has its own overlays to it, its own issues that when you zoom in close enough, you start seeing some of the discrepancies that Brian highlighted. Buildings maybe not being in exactly the right place if you try to go to those coordinates, right? And this is one of the activities that is getting better because of this OpenStreetMap option as a way of getting a base map that all of us can use. As Brian highlighted, that's really crucial. If we're going to be comparing, we need to be all on the same page and looking at the same data and the same coordinates that ultimately make up what we're seeing here. But I want to stress how important it is to maybe change this to that satellite view, like what Brian was showing us. If you go down, you can learn more in the bottom here about this satellite base map that is getting provided to us. And I want to stress here, this is not the real world. This is a composite because one of the things that isn't visible are all the clouds. So, as a land cover scientist, I love this because clouds are one of the big things that we have to deal with if we want to start looking at tree cover or the greenness and some of these aspects. So just recognize that this is not a single moment in time. of a measurement. This is a composite over maybe many years to give us a view of what's there. And so when you're using this as comparison, recognize this time component as a really important science skill to recognize differences and recognize that that could be why you are seeing what you're seeing compared to what you thought you might be seeing. It's a hypothesis of what you might experience on the ground, right? So that's again, that's kind of the reference where we're starting with, and all of us use that because our we've been told this is right, okay? And so if this is right, then when we start looking at our data that the Globe community has put together, we can actually go in, and I'm going to look at the land cover piece because this one is what I spend all my time doing. And I wanted to really emphasize you can select multiple years or time steps within here. There's some that have been decided for you. And the default is 1 year, just looking at the last 1 year of data. Um, and so I think, that's something that, again, is a research question. Are you looking at the most up-to-date information, or do you want to dive into the 30 years of Globe data that might be there? Okay. And when we start thinking about how the tree has grown, we need a baseline. And that's what Brian really kind of went through is getting us a baseline for a single tree or for a community of trees. But if you go into the Globe database and there is no measurement for that location, that's something really important. We need that baseline. And as soon as we get the baseline, then we can start doing some of the things that Brian was highlighting. But if we don't have a measurement in that location, then we really are having to use the satellite data that is presented to us here to try to guess at what we might see if we actually go into that location and make our own measurements. So I really like, this is really cool to me because we always have a hypothesis whenever we go anywhere these days. This is very different than where we started with Globe 30 years ago, where we really didn't have an idea of what we would experience. But now, even if it's from this Globe Viz site that we're looking at here and this base map, you should be able to have an understanding of what you're going to walk into and make measurements of. Okay. And so I, since Brian was down here picking in Brazil, I'm going to go down there as well because this is, one of these places that I've never been. And so I have to rely on the satellite data to help inform my hypothesis or my understanding of that environment and that location. And so, if I do that, I'm going to, zoom in here. And as Brian highlighted, this is really important because we have different satellites that are measuring at different resolutions. And so as you zoom in, you start to notice more detail. And so you really need to be thinking about the instrument that you're using and how much area are we talking about. An area is one of those things that, again, you should be highlighting whenever you're working within Globe. How much of an area are you measuring? And have you measured a lot, like Brian highlighted, that you now are measuring a 13 meter by 13 meter area, a square area, right? And so I'm going to keep zooming in here. Because you do start noticing, the colors start changing. And that's really important because, wow, there we go again. We're looking at different resolutions and maybe even different times of imagery. Really useful, but just recognize that it changes as you zoom in. Pay attention to that because, again, this is how I'm building my hypothesis of what I'm going to find in this photo, in this globe measurement that was there. right? So I'm going to keep zooming in, and oh, this happens when you over zoom. We now run out of free public availability of data. You may not recognize this, but this is one of our frustrations of doing public science. This data is available, it just costs us money. So I'm going to zoom out to the closest level I can actually see with our free imagery. And this is a great place to spend some time and look at the context of that measurement. Maybe you'll be able to see individual tree crowns, like down here in this green area that I'm highlighting. Um, you might start seeing patterns where people have done some things, and maybe there is different vegetation type, right? So this aerial perspective is a really valuable thing that you can use in relation to your globe measurement. Um, and so here I'm just going to click on this one, and this is how you can start gathering data for your own project here. And one thing is I have to sit here and wait, and I've had this happen to me recently. Where are my photos? Right? I should be able to see some of these, and I can go back and forth, but I can't actually see the data. And so this is one thing where the visualization systems sometimes hide our data from us. And it's really frustrating because the whole reason for this is for me to be able to review my data, to be able to see other people's data, other things like that. So if this happens to you, this is actually a really important part of the science process. Barriers like this exist, and if nobody shares it with the community, then it can't get resolved. Okay. And so it becomes, a reason why we can't finish our methodology. We can't actually work with this data. Okay. And so it may not seem like this is a science result, but it is. And what ends up happening is we don't end up answering the science question that we wanted to of what's the land cover in this location? What were the measurements that somebody made? I now have to switch to error evaluation. And I have to try to actually figure out what is happening here. And maybe I will never be able to finish my science project because I'm having to interact with the Globe help desk to try to figure out, well, where do I find the data that I submitted or this person submitted for this location? This is a success. And I want to I cannot emphasize that enough. Because this then might be why we need to do something different with our cyber infrastructure. How we do that is an experiment as well. There isn't one solution at this point. A lot of people have their ideas of how to make a map online and how to mash together this data like this. So I just want to stress that, it can feel as a student or as a person, as a researcher, that I've done something wrong here. But I haven't. This is part of moving our world from the physical world into our digital twin that we are developing. Um, and so I want to really stress, like, okay, that was unexpected to me, and now I am a bit distracted from my science question, right? But before we totally write the Globe Help Desk and say what's going on here, let's do a little bit more investigation into the data that is in the database. Okay, so I'm first just going to go over to the measurements and see, like, is there any information here? So in the database, we actually see some unique things that help us to maybe interact with our data. One is this unique ID that, like Brian was saying, everything going into the Globe database has a unique number to it. And that allows us to track that single measurement. We track what instrument was made, or how was this observation made. This is exactly what Brian was showing us, but he kind of jumped ahead because that data source was from ISAT 2. And if you want other data, you're going to have to go somewhere else, right? But knowing how the data was measured is vital for the utility of this. And in fact, we might have to go and learn more about this before we can actually make use of it. It's really annoying to all of us, but it's part of the process. And so this is where our documentation comes in. What are the units of measure? Again, this piece that Brian showed actually is really important when we talk about how we located ourselves. Here, it's saying that we use the map. It actually says automatic when it is, or I'm sorry, it says automatic when it is using the sensor of the phone, of the mobile device. And that allows us to know, to quantify and make a measurement of our accuracy using that sensor. If we had actually used the map underneath this, it would have said manual instead of automatic. And that's the way that I know of how these numbers are getting created, how it's actually ending up there. That might tell me why it is in the location that it is. Or again, I might have to start taking into consideration this 28 meters of a buffer around this actual location on this map. All of this quantification right there is a really good research question. This is not always going to be the same. And so if Brian had brought that in earlier when he showed us the 5 tree heights, we would have been able to build some confidence that we are talking about a specific location within within a certain error. And all of our coordinates have error. All of our measurements have an uncertainty like that, uncertainty or error. And so, so when I go down, I can actually also see what is the elevation of this spot on Earth. That again, is something that you can use to compare to the location from ISAT 2. This is supposed to be similar to that number that Brian showed us. You might have a tree height that is above that, but then this elevation should also be something that you can compare. And I want to highlight that this number is getting presented to all of us, but what is the source of it? So I really kind of want to stress that one of the things that you can do in the 2 weeks of this student research campaign, or for the virtual science symposium, is investigate these numbers. And if you only have one observation there, it makes it, you can do less, but still reporting these out and telling us what the uncertainty is. It does. How do you know that this is a reasonable value? Again, it takes us right back to this idea of references. And so, to me, there's a lot of opportunities to just dig into this, how the measurements went from out in the field and how you made them into the GLOBE database. And so take that opportunity to investigate that translation. And part of it is you have a hypothesis that this is correct. This is what you should expect. Well, how do you actually make elevation measurements? How does this happen in Brazil? I don't really know. I know how it happens in the United States, but that actually is a great investigation right there. And it really goes back to what Brian has been highlighting about the purpose of the ISAT 2 mission, which is to give us a global baseline elevation and then start thinking about and characterizing what we're doing on top of that, the vertical structure of that location. Is this sea level, or what happens as we have a sea level rise or changes in this reference elevation? I could keep going on with this one because it's a lot of fun thinking about these numbers that are getting presented to us. Okay, but I want to really, highlight something that Brian was noting. And this is something that, again, is a little hidden to us that is worth investigating. This is the idea of the globe site. Now, a globe site is not the same thing as where you make your measurement of the thing that you want to measure. It might be a tree, it might be some vegetation, or it might be water quality. But a site is, by definition, a 100-meter by 100-meter area on the ground that has its lower left coordinate or the southwest coordinate at this reported location. Note the number of decimal points here will take you to this spot on the map. And what is sort of hidden from you are the actual measurement numbers. They're not presented here in the GlobeViz site. You actually can't really get to them easily through here. So just recognize that what is presented on this map, that coordinate that Brian was showing earlier, is not the measurement one. And in fact, we have to dive into the database to get those numbers. Okay. But this gets you within an area. And then it does, then you have to do exactly what Brian was describing. You might have to search around to find the actual tree that was measured there. Again, hopefully photos are available to you, but if they're not there, then you have to start interacting with the globe digital data in a different way. And that can be, frustrating, and it's more time consuming. But this is why we have these science symposiums, is to actually share with each other challenges in accessing data, solutions to accessing data, and hopefully you can do what Brian was able to do, mainly because because you collected the data. If you're somebody like me who comes in and is trying to be a secondary user, there's a lot more questions that come in that I have to solve or quantify or think about in a way that the primary person that collected the data doesn't. Okay, and I want to stress that because that's one of these things where field notes are one way that you actually capture and help somebody research your data. And that's the name of the game here, right? If you're the first person out, you've searched, made a measurement, made a claim, and really, if somebody comes out and tries to do the same thing, will they be able to get the same numbers? Okay, so I just want to stress right here is what you can do right there. If you want to actually see the numbers, you can click on this, data table icon, and then you will be taken to the database itself, where you will start to see the actual a little bit more about it. But again, even here, we're not seeing the measured latitude, measured longitude. We're seeing the grouping of these things. And so this is why when Brian has said we have 1,900 measurements, but only 600 locations, that means that we have some clustering of our measurements. And when you zoom in and start going through the GlobeViz site, that might be something that you encounter as you go through. So, this is a lot of fun. This is the data science. And one of the things that you can do for your student research, or have somebody research your location and see, is that possible? What ended up happening as they tried to replicate your initial measurements? Those are a lot of fun, and so I'll end this really detailed piece here, because again, this is something I was surprised that I've had this error during this transitional period that Brian was highlighting earlier on. And so the only thing I can say is this is science in action. This is something that happens. And I love this because this is authentic. months ago, we may not have experienced this, but make a note and send it into the Globe Help Desk about what you're experiencing as you go through this challenge, right? So that's one thing that I want to note because I've had this before. The other thing that I want to share with you, because we've been talking a lot about sites and locating yourself. I One of the things that you can do is if you come in here and turn on the map grid, um, that should actually give you that 100-meter bounding box inside of here. For some reason, mine's not doing it, and that might happen. And this might be my browser or some issue like that. But took a little moment in time. But here you can actually see this 100-meter grid. And so this is something that you can use to guide your site selection so that you make sure that you're not uh, uh, just measuring the same area, which can be a problem if you are trying to understand a community. Okay. And but I want to stress that this is available to you. And one of the things that you can actually do is move this down and use this scale bar to help you understand the size of these things. You can only do it one way, but this is that transformation into the digital world that we want to practice. Okay. And so as you're evaluating the data that's available to you for your research or that has been put in here by research, I want to stress some of these things that are available to you that um, will make your comparison to the satellite data, which is one of those badges, easier. Or again, it's okay to say these coordinates give me these numbers, and that's not what is actually there. And if you've made the measurements, that's how you can really defend that claim that there is something more challenging that you have to go through before you can actually make use of all the satellite data that we've talked about throughout our campaign. Okay. So I just want to, stress, that this visualization tool is one way of accessing your data, getting a lot of the tree height data or the land cover data or other sort of things that you can use in this 2-week sprint that we're putting through here. And so, with that, it looks like my window is lagging a little bit here. And and so I want to pause here and let things sort of catch up. But I want to make sure that you're seeing how easy it is to quickly look at and examine and analyze your Globe data or data that's available in Globe and be able to turn it into a research poster. If you have any questions or want to team up with a satellite or with a satellite or get that mentor badge, reach out to Brian or myself or Peter Falcon or any one of us, and we'd be glad to help you in the next 2 weeks have a successful submission. And so I just wanted to emphasize that. And what I want to do as I turn this over to Peter Falcon. Um, is I want to take us to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and sort of Southern California, and one of the things that made for me makes what we've been doing so very vital, and that is you just have no idea what the future holds. Right. And I want to stress, as we zoom into some of our areas here, um, you know, change over time is one of the reasons why we do the science that we do. And we recognize that our methods are going to change because people are going to get better with computational science like this. We're going to get more people into our communities, and this change over time is something that is something that we can anticipate, but we also can't know exactly where it's going to happen. And so, Peter, here I zoomed in on a particular area in California, and this to me is one of these fun things. So, Peter, I want to bring you in here, because where the heck am I in the world, right? This is what I love about satellite images is I don't have any cultural reference, right? And if I've never been somewhere, I have no idea what I'm looking at. So in our final couple minutes here, Peter, take us into what your life has sort of been through in the last year since I heard about and we last talked about and checked in with you about the fires that happened about this time. Was it just 1 year ago, or was it a little bit longer?
January 7th. Yeah, 1 year ago and about a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, again, like this is kind of one of these things that disturbances can bring up a lot of, trauma. And, I know a lot of people there that you worked with went through and lost homes and things like that. But Peter, give us a little, help us to understand, not just the trees because that's the fun piece, right? But what has this disturbance event brought to you, and then we'll kind of zoom in a little bit on the data that I know you collected with us. But Peter,
Mm.
what has this year been like, after experiencing something, that disturbance event like that?
Yeah, it's been extremely difficult. As you know, California went through, I think, in the Eaton fire, it was like the fifth deadliest fire in California's history. Fifth deadliest, second most destructive. I'm going to read off some stats here. This California fire, it covered over 14,000 acres, 9,400 homes or structures were burned, 19 deaths occurred. And really, it was like a perfect storm of high winds in a very dry area with about 8 month period of drought. California, we're pretty much always in and out of a drought. So of course, you add all that together, you add a flame, and it's just like tinder. It's going to go up, and that's Eaton Fire. The Altadena area is in the foothills of San Gabriel Mountain. Very, very, as mentioned, dry. A lot of forest in that area. And there's also the Pacific Palisades as well, which is another fire. This one was, I believe, something like the ninth deadliest and third most destructive wildfire in California history. And that one covered 23,700 acres, 12 deaths, something like 6,800 homes or structures were burned. And now what we're seeing is a lot of changes, not just from buildings starting to go up again, but really we're starting to see a regrowth, a repopulation of trees, of vegetation, of animal wildlife coming back into these areas, kind of reclaiming that for their own. For a very long time, we couldn't actually rebuild because there's a lot of hazardous waste, a lot of soil contamination that we had to contend with. People really couldn't start building yet until that was dealt with. But now that we're kind of going past that phase, we're starting to see more and more houses starting to populate, more and more structures, starting to be rebuilt. But I actually looked through and did a quick search and found a lot of images, not just satellite imagery, which we love satellite imagery, but I did see a lot of drone footage, aerial footage as well, a lot of before and after what the fire, you know, what it did to the land, and then now a year later, what it's looking like. And as I looked through that data, I realized pretty quickly you started to see a lot of green space, areas that were ash white, just burnt to the ground, where you thought nothing would come of it because it just looked like a war zone. But a year later, we're starting to see more and more grass, trees starting to germinate, actually starting to give fruits. One colleague, she went back to her property and her birds of paradise are about 5 to 6 feet high. So we're starting to see, as as Jeff Goldblum said in Jurassic Park, life is finding a way, and that's a wonderful thing to see. Here everyone has either a family member, a friend, or somebody that was affected by the fire. Me personally, I had two houses, a grandmother and an aunt right across the street from each other that both lost their houses. But one of the interesting things is in front of my aunt's house, she has a very large oak tree that is probably over 100 years old. This thing has been hit by lightning and it survived. It's lived through this fire as well. And it is still growing. And it really is like a staple of when you drive by, you know where her property is because of that huge tree. And it is kind of for me like heartwarming to know like it's like a sign of rebuild. We can continue, we can regrow. And if that tree can make it, then so can Angelina's as well. So it's a wonderful feeling to see that. But yeah, in the evenings you hear not just a coyote, hear packs of coyote. You see a lot of animal wildlife coming down from the forest as they're basically reclaiming the area that was once theirs.
Wow, Peter, that is just, I mean, there is lessons to be learned in after disturbances. And unfortunately it's really hard to live through those, to go through those. But that, like you said, life finding a way. And it's going to be different. I mean, there's just like that's what disturbance is, whether it's in our personal life or whether it's in the environment around us. That is just unfortunately like a part of it. And so, I hear it in you and, both, you know, a mourning of what was lost, because of that familiarity, so much of the references of your world, right, were there. But I love so much that, one of the things that is a reference point for you is a living tree,
Mhm.
and that witness to so much of life. And I want to encourage all of us, that's part of why we are excited to bring this campaign to you, because just engaging with these ideas and engaging with people like Peter, and what they experience, hopefully gives us some resilience in our own hard times. And hopefully we can learn lessons from each other, about how to get through those. Because like you said, Peter, there's not just one, but there's all these other experiences and communities that are going through similar experiences. And so if we zoom out from, what that immediacy of what you talked about, one of the things that I see that, I hope everybody thinks about, with the trees and with the fires, that as we think about what they're experiencing today, forecasting what might they experience 90 days or 180 days from now. How will they need us, actually? Will they need us to come in and protect them from something? Or will we end up losing some of those elders? And, Peter, I'm really glad that you still have that elder tree there. And that, to me, that's one of these things that it's hard to predict who survives these things. Um, but it's really wonderful when you can look back and have that shared experience, even between, how did they survive that and how did you survive it? And you, you get to go
Yeah.
forward.
Another thing that it amazes me is, as I mentioned, there was a lot of hazardous material, a lot of asbestos in these older buildings, a lot of contamination in soil. Yet these trees, these bushes, these flowers, these plants found a way to grow. So they're growing through this, all these chemicals in the ground. We can't build yet. We're starting to, but once again, that didn't stop them. So it's kind of once again that term we talked about it months ago, resilience, and it's wonderful to see that in these trees and these plant lives.
Yeah. Oh, Peter, thank you for ending this on such, I'd say, that's the hopeful piece, things like this have happened in the past, and we can learn, hopefully. And, I just say thank you for, helping to document this going forward. Again, we don't know, as you said, when people are going to start building, when that land cover is going to start changing, and all of those things are indicators of the health of that environment. And so our own little observations can actually show us the path forward. And that to me is why going out and doing photos, doing my remote sensing through Globe and archiving it here, is an act of doing something. It's not passive. And I just thank you, Peter, for ending this on that way. And I hope people will reach out to us as you might feel stress over the next 2 weeks, trying to maybe participate, doing, being part of this virtual science symposium. But we're here to help. And next month we'll reflect on some of those, and also highlight how all of our efforts for the last 8 years is going to be presented at a professional forest conference at the end, at the beginning of May. And so I hope people will come back and join us to reflect on what the science that we're doing to look at trees around the globe. Brian, do you have anything to wrap us up with?
Nope, you said it all, Peter. I think that was perfect. And I put your quote in the chat there. Our observations can show us the path forward, and I think that's a perfect place to end. Other than to say, stay tuned, for an announcement for our next webinar for February. So, but thank you all for participating, and thank you for the discussion today, Peter. And yeah, and I'm glad, Peter Falcon, things are starting to, rebuild, naturally, especially, glad to see that all happening, and people's lives are, getting back to shape. And but yeah, it's good to see also, like, as Peter mentioned, that the tree that and love so well is, still there, and you know still a witness to everything. So yeah. So all right, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next time.